Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Data Science Hangout. I'm Rachel. I lead customer marketing at Posit, and I'm so excited to have you joining us today. The Hangout is our open space to hear what's going on in the world of data across different industries, chat about data science leadership, and connect with others who are facing similar things as you. We get together here every Thursday at the same time, same place. So if this is your first time joining us, it is so nice to meet you. If it is anybody's first time, let us know in the chat. We'd love to say hi and welcome anybody in who's joining for the first time today. We're all dedicated to keeping this a friendly and welcoming space for everybody. So we love hearing from you no matter your years of experience, titles, industry, or the languages that you work in. It's totally okay to also just listen in here if you want, and awesome to be a part of the party that happens in the Zoom chat. You'll notice that people share a lot of helpful resources and thoughts in the chat as well. There's also 3 ways that you can jump in and ask questions or provide your own perspective on certain topics too. So first, you could raise your hand on Zoom and I'll keep an eye out and I can call on you. 2, you can put questions in the Zoom chat. And if you're in your coffee shop or maybe out walking your dog or something and you want to put a star next to it, I'll know to read it. Otherwise, I'll call on you to introduce yourself and add some context. And then third, we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously too. I did just want to mention, because we have quite a few people maybe joining for the first time, that we do also have a LinkedIn group for the Data Science Hangout. Not always the easiest for ongoing conversations, but it's helpful to help connect with people that you meet here, maybe have met through the chat. And I also did want to say real quickly before we get started here, and I know Curtis will share this in the chat, but the call for talks just recently opened for the Posit conference this year. And so I just wanted to make that known, and Curtis can share the link there in the chat. I guess one other quick note is if you are watching this recording sometime in the future and want to join us live, the link to add it to your calendar will be in the details below. And there's no rules that anybody has to stay on the whole time or talk, come and go as it fits your schedule. But with all that, thank you again for joining us. And I am so excited to be joined by my co-host today, Wes McKinney, Principal Architect at Posit. And Wes, want to kick things off here by introducing yourself and your role, but also something you like to do outside of work too.
Yeah, I'm a software developer and an entrepreneur. So I've worked on a bunch of open source projects in and around data science and Python in particular. So started what became the Pandas project about 16 years ago, and I've started a couple of companies and created some other companies oriented at providing financial funding for open source development. Partly with Posits help. So worked on the Apache Arrow data infrastructure and computing layer for data science tools and database systems. And that I worked closely with Posit when it was still our studio throughout that project. And most recently spent a little over 3 years starting Voltron Data and getting it off the ground to a 130 person company or so. And just in last fall made the transition out of my full-time role at Voltron Data. So I'm still an advisor there on the advisory board. And I decided to rejoin up with more full-time with Posit to kind of work to make awesome polyglot data science tools and open source software.
And what about something you like to do
Oh
outside of work?
yeah, outside of work. Outside of work, I do a lot of yoga. So it turns out like both Hadley and I are super into yoga, which is kind of just random and unrelated. But so I do that. I like to cook and run and read books and I still find a little bit of time for video games now and then, console video games. I have a soft spot for retro games. So every now and then we'll, indulge in a playthrough of an old Super Nintendo game or something like that.
Love it. Oh, well, I know you shared a little bit about this in your intro, but to kick us off here, could you share a bit about your path and kind of decision to join Posit?
Yeah. People who know me well, know that I've been involved in kind of collaborating with our studio Posits for a pretty long time. So I met JJ Allaire, the CEO of Posit, well over a decade ago when our studio was just getting started, and I started talking with Hadley about things that we could work on together that would help like end the data science wars, and looking out for opportunities to work together on things that would help create more like reusable software, and things that would help data science teams working with open source technology be more productive, enable Python and R teams to work together more effectively. And so there were a couple of things that happened. So firstly, I think Jupyter, IPython started the IPython notebook that became Jupyter. And so there started to be work on notebooks and development environments that could be shared across Python and R. And then when I was interested in starting what became Apache Arrow, one of the first things I did was reach out to Hadley about building a data format that would enable data to be shared between dplyr and R data frames and pandas data frames to make using R and Python together a lot faster and a lot simpler. So we got together in February 2016 and built what became Feather. So that was kind of the start of a more hands-on collaboration with our studio at that point. And then a couple years later, I partnered up more formally with Posit to create Ursa Labs. So providing significant funding for Apache Arrow development, helping with the administration of Ursa Labs so that I could focus on building software as opposed to running a company. And So in a way, Posit essentially helped me incubate what became Ursa Computing and then Voltron Data. And so Posit remains like a kind of a shareholder and kind of an active participant in things we've been doing in Arrow and Voltron Data. And so when I was considering kind of my next move after being full time in a CTO role at Voltron Data, the decision for me was, given that Posit has expanded its umbrella of its products to support Python, building for polyglot data science teams, I felt there was an opening for me to use my experience and skills to really help bolster that effort, align the product offerings, and create really amazing experiences for data science teams. So it ended up being like really great timing, given that I was at a crossroads in my career, like deciding, how to allocate my time between, the various projects that I work on. And so, and I've been, just an enormous fan of the company. And so it's great to kind of, to be back and working more closely with the team, and to have the opportunity to work on software that has such a large impact on so many people.
Thank you. Well, we're all so excited to have you here too. Um, I know I introduced you as principal architect, but maybe it might be helpful to explain a bit about what that means. What is a principal architect?
Yeah, at present, I'm a little bit of a mixture between a very technical product manager and a senior software developer, software architect. So on one hand, I'm helping provide feedback and like strategic guidance and alignment in Posits product roadmap features and identifying blind spots and things that Posit needs to build in order to create really great tools and systems to support in particular Python focused or Python only data science teams. I'm also, as I'm finding my sea legs and the different projects going on in the company, I'm doing, some strategic development, like kind of targeted, have high leverage, development work on different projects that taking advantage of my background and experience with tools like pandas and kind of low level data work, like areas where stuff that I know really well, where I can jump into a project, provide some targeted development assistance, and help accelerate projects feature roadmap. It's only been about 10 weeks, so we'll see where things are in another 3 months or another 6 months, by the time of Posit Conf in August. But it's been really exciting, and there's so much stuff going on. So it's also an opportunity for me to really get up to speed on all the things that Posit's been doing in the last 5 years while I've been busy working on Arrow, working on startups, but also to spend time listening to get look at what data science teams are struggling with right now, what things are working well, like what things aren't working well, and where are the opportunities to build things that can make things better for data science teams.
Thank you. I'm starting to see a few questions coming in, and I know a few people joined right after the start. So I'll just remind everybody, if you want to ask questions, you can post them into the Zoom chat and I will call on you to jump in. Or you can also ask questions anonymously and our team will reshare the Slido link in the chat for you as well. But I see Sunday, you had a question about Voltron Data. Do you want to ask that live?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Interesting background, and it's interesting to hear how many things you've been involved in. Posit Arrow and Voltron, but Voltron is the one that's completely strange to me. What's that about? What's that about? Sorry, my name is Sunday. I'm a senior research analyst with Premier Incorporated Health Consultants, and I work with all of these tools. I'm asking from outside of I'm calling from Baltimore,
Okay.
Maryland. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, so so learning more about Voltron Data, we could spend the rest of the hour just talking about the company and all the things that it's doing. So we produced this really great like knowledge base called the composable codex that goes through basically the history of how the trends in data processing systems and how we are currently in an era that we're working towards um, basically modularizing the layers of the data stack to make things more interoperable and more like faster and more reusable. Apache Arrow was one major piece of technology that was a missing key to being able to enable some of this modularization and composability. And last year, we worked with one of our development partners, Meta, and their data infrastructure team. They have a project called Velox that is helping kind of unify and modularize their query processing and query execution inside Meta's internal data platform. And so we created a paper that is I might fumble the title, but it's the Composable Data Management System Manifesto. And so I would highly encourage you to check out the Composable Codex, which is on the voltrondata.com website, as well as the VLDB paper, the Composable Data Management System Manifesto, which goes into kind of the kind of the technical, foundations of like why, like where we are in the development timeline of database systems, data science systems, data processing, and why we are working to create these modular and composable components for building next generation data systems. And so Voltron Data just recently launched its distributed GPU accelerated modular data engine, which we're working to incorporate into data infrastructure providers like HP, and we believe that employing accelerators like GPUs, but also custom silicon FPGAs is going to be a big trend in terms of reducing the carbon footprint of large scale data processing and machine learning. And so there's a lot of, there's a big kind of a deep rabbit hole there, but it's a very exciting time in the world of computing. I think from the standpoint of data scientists, most people on the call, we just want to write data frame operations and SQL queries and have things go fast and not use a lot of energy. And so another project that I've been very involved with over the last decade, and has a pretty good sized team of Voltron Data, is the Python Ibis project, which provides a unified data frame API to tons of different SQL and non-SQL backends. And that's one of the kind of the spokes of the strategy to facilitate the modularization of the data stack. So you can think about Ibis as being like dplyr for Python. So we've put a lot of development work into maturing that tool in the last few years.
Thank you. I see, James, you had a question in the chat about working on a multilingual team. Do you want to jump in here next?
Sure. So I work on a multilingual Python and R team, but it's not a software development team so much as just processes. We take processes that currently exist, ask, how can we automate these, make them run faster, and get data to end users that need it for a variety of purposes. And one of the main problems that I've encountered in working on that team is I'm an R user. I use projects in REMD, and all of the Python users, all 6 or 7 of them, use Conda environments. And is there any progress on helping those two different workflows like speak better together?
I know that it is. I know that it is. I don't know much about RM, if that's how you pronounce it, but I know that it is possible to it is possible to manage an R dependency stack from Conda. That's maybe not the answer that you were that you were looking for, but there is like a bunch of work in recent times on improving the package management tools in general, particularly around cross-language packaging. So like one of the problems in the Python world is that there is the Python package index and there's the pip installer tool. And so the Python package index has the problem that it doesn't help you with non-Python dependencies, and developers have to do a lot of work in order to package up and deploy their packages as wheels on the Python package index. And so for me, like as a package developer, I've had to suffer a lot of hardship in order to get my software, like Arrow, for example, on the Python package index. But basically pip and pipenv and poetry, and there's various Python tools. They only work if like your dependency stack and what you're managing is something that lives on the Python package index. And so if you have R or you have like other things that need to be installed for your full application, then these kind of pip centric or Python package index centric tools are not going to work for you. And the same is true of like if you have an R centric application with CRAN. And so really we need to use we need to use cross language or language agnostic package management tools that assist with kind of creating these reproducible environments. I think Conda has the unfortunate association that people see it as, basically a product of Anaconda, the company. But actually, I mean, nowadays, if you can get a non-Anaconda distributed, installation of Conda and Mamba, which is like a faster replacement for Conda. And there's a new packaging tool called Pixie. You're probably saying to yourselves, why do we need another packaging tool? But I'm pretty excited about Pixie for a couple of reasons. So firstly, it enables you to manage your dependency stack, without having to edit YAML files manually. So like you just add a dependency to your stack or remove a dependency and it manages the YAML files for you, similar to NPM or Cargo if anyone's used Rust. And so I don't know that it's necessarily the answer that you're looking for, but I would say that trying to look at things like Pixie or even Conda and trying to see if it's possible to create use those tools to manage both your R environments that you want to deploy or your Python environments is one possible approach. There might be other approaches that I'm not aware of, but if I were in that situation, that's what I would try to do. And then if I can't get it to work, then I would write an angry blog post saying like I tried to do this and I failed, and so maybe that might motivate the developers to fix it. I've kind of made a personal like promise to myself to like never work on a Python packaging tool, because it's like, we've all thought about it, because you get frustrated with the packaging and you want to say, hey, I'm going to go fix this, but I've made a pledge that I will not. That's, I might build a text editor before I build a Python packaging tool.
I was trying to make a few associations between some of the questions, and maybe I'll get it right, maybe I won't. But Regis, I don't know. I think your question might be associated with this one. But do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Also, I usually have this as my background, and I say this is what data scientists do because we bring data together so that we can enable decisions. But I guess for what I'm talking about right now, my question, this is like R, and that's Python, and maybe this is Posit, I guess. It's the Steam, it's Thor. Anyway, the question that I'm having, because I know that you're talking about being able to use the two pieces, but what I've been hearing, because I'm from our land, is that usually when you try to deploy a tool somewhere, you have to spin up a virtual server, and then have a Docker image inside of it in order to get the packages in the project to be consistent so that it works the same at home when you deploy it as it did when you built it in the factory. But it's, I mean, you were saying, Wes, that you've gotten frustrated with package management stuff before, and you might end up writing an angry blog post or something. But not to toot the horn of Posit, but it's really effortless to deploy our projects and do however many iterations you need in Posit team. And I'm just wondering if there is a plan to make it also painless for Python and R together, not using any additional stuff, but just because it's a real blocker. Because right now, if you have to spin up this virtual instance with a Docker image, you have to talk to the IT department or something and have them do all of that, especially if you need everything to be the same. So, but I don't want to miss out on everything that's happening in Python land. So that's really what I'm asking.
Yeah, no, I think this is yeah, I don't have a simple answer for you right now, but I think you've hit the nail on the head that like this is the kind of problem where as a data scientist or as a system developer, you don't, this is not the thing that you want to have to spend your precious time like sweating over. It's like how to make this like just work in the production environment. And so I think it's important for in an enterprise setting with, the various controls that are in place in the production environment. I think it's critical to make that process easy for, our only applications, which I think, to your point, I think, Posit has made a big investment in making that seamless and just work for R. And so getting to that point with Python applications or applications that use Python and R, I think that's a critical, that's a critical thing. So, yeah, it's one of the areas where I'm getting up to speed on, what's been done, while also, trying to stay up to date on all of the, there's, active work going on in the Python community to improve this, like, deployment and like productionization problem. Even like, Python is pretty fussy about site packages. And so like that's still like a thing that, like still a thing that plagues users. So it's great to hear that feedback. But yeah, something I will definitely be, zooming in on and trying to help get to a place where people are happy with how things work.
One very thanks for that answer. One very unsatisfying pseudo solution that I've kind of thought of is just using Python when I have to use Python, but just keeping it restricted to just those things that I need to use it for and deploying that in an API and then just reaching into that API from within R, because you can guarantee that R will work the same, but you can't always guarantee, especially if like the IT department changes dependencies and those propagate and break things or whatever. So, but I know that's not great or satisfying. So
yeah, I mean, I think the ideal thing is that you would have like like a package, like essentially the equivalent of a package lock um, on Python, so that what you develop and test locally is exactly what you're getting in the production in the production environment. Um, and I think some users may want to be, even be able to um, you know build the Docker image, like build a Docker image locally, and have some tooling, around that. So you can say, this, this requirements file, like this base Docker image, like, build this for me so that I can, wire it up with my R application and use it through, Reticulate or, through a web API. To know that, like, yeah, because to have something that works locally and then you deploy it and then like maybe it works initially, but then it gets broken because of something that was out of your control. That's not that's no fun.
yeah, so just I know I'm taking too much time, but I'm just
I'll
hoping and
I'll give you 10 more seconds here,
yeah,
Regis.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you're going to be working on that because the Docker thing doesn't really fly. It's you can't ask the IT department every time you need a new Docker image, especially for the stuff we do as data scientists. But yeah, thanks. I'll turn off my camera.
Thank you, Regis. Okay, I see, Abigail, you had a question about some of the lessons Posit is learning from Python users. Want to ask that here?
Yeah, thanks. So, I feel like Quarto and Shiny are like the two big projects. I've used both of them. I went back and forth a lot with a very patient Posit developer on why my Python build was not compatible, and I think he was a little taken aback by like how many rounds back and forth we were doing on like how broken my Python build was, whatever. So I feel like maybe that's one of the issues. But like in general, like what are the things that Posit has kind of taken away from like those like both fairly big tools and trying to pull in Python users, and like how has that gone? Any lessons learned?
Um, I think I mean I think Quarto is definitely like a great example of the project started out. I think the project started out like not working super closely with the Jupyter the Jupyter ecosystem. And at some point while the project was still a little bit flying under the radar, they kind of reworked things to make it something that works really well for that like Jupyter centric user. And so, for example, there were there were people working on, like Jeremy Howard is one example of somebody who's a very Python-centric user, working on deep learning, and he wanted to write his book in Jupyter Notebooks and then convert it into a Corda website, but also generate DocBook XML for O'Reilly Media. And I also, my book, like I, got in touch with JJ and the Corda developers about, it's like, I would like to publish this book online, and, can you help me? Is Corda something that can help? And so I think that, to understand, the the R community and the Python community, I think, are working from different starting places, and those and the ecosystems have like developed organically in different ways. And I think another thing that I often think about is the fact that the Python ecosystem on a relative basis like has a lot, like there's a much wider spectrum of types of users, like what they're, the type of work that they are doing, like the types of applications that they're building. And so I think in the R world, again, the generalization is not 100% valid, but I would say that, the plurality of people, working in R doing, data science, data analysis, statistics, machine learning. And in the Python world, you have a lot more users that are doing some data work, using some of these tools, but that data analysis work might be incidental to some other aspect of their job, some other job responsibilities. And that might be more software engineering or building production applications or building web services, or there's many different things. Obviously, you can do those things in R too, but in terms of how like these teams have developed inside companies, yeah, it's the teams and the people and the teams end up looking fairly different. I think that it's great that we have this opportunity for cross-pollination, both in the open source libraries. I think the Python community has learned a lot from the R community in terms of API design, usability, user experience. And I've tried to incorporate like lessons from the tidyverse and from dplyr and from ggplot2 into the things that I've built. And I think also the R community has learned from things that the Python community has done also. And so I think yeah, I think there's enormous opportunity, and the fact that we have like a lot more active and more healthy dialogue, and that we're not hearing as much about like the language wars of like, Python sucks or R sucks or like R is not a language. Like I haven't seen one of those blog posts in a while. And so I think getting past the like red team, blue team kind of, bickering about whose programming language is better has enabled us to have like just a lot more productive conversations about how we can build real tools for humans that are usable and accessible, and how we can basically make the tent bigger and bring more, because really the challenge that I see, and that I think others see as well, is that we're not working R versus Python. We're really like open source versus closed source proprietary software. And so kind of expanding the tent for open source and making open source like the preferred and attractive way for businesses to go forward. That is our main challenge. And so if it's fine, if you have a bunch of open source software and an individual can get up and running, but as soon as they want to go do that at work and they find that they're running into tons and tons of roadblocks, or there's a lot of not so fun stuff that needs to be built, to take free software that you can download on the internet or pull from GitHub, and make it work in a business setting. So I think we've made great progress, but still a long road to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. I love that. Real tools for humans. I see Russell put that into the chat as well. I see, Libby, you had a question bit earlier want to jump in here next?
Sure. It was a long time ago. Let me see. Um,
I can pull back.
okay. So yeah, I'm just wondering, as a person who has been sort of a driving force behind a lot of packages and platforms and things that have really wide visibility, which most of us on this call do not do and have not experienced. Do you feel like you had to develop a thick skin? Speaking of red team versus blue team, and like all of the feedback and the opinions that you get from all directions, or that, we see from all directions. And if you did have to develop a thick skin, how did you go about that?
Um, I I did. I will say that I didn't I don't think that I always handled the negative or petty feedback with grace. I can think back on times where I became sort of upset or had an emotional reaction to something that somebody said. I remember one time Jeff Reback, who's now got more contributions to Pandas than I do, and he was corresponding with somebody, an issue reporter on GitHub, and the person asked him if he was like a QA developer or a real developer. and and so like there are all these like little comments that needle, or that people complain about things, and maybe they're missing the bigger picture, or they don't realize that, like, yeah, it's imperfect, but you already worked really hard on what's there, and you feel like they don't appreciate what you have built, and they're only focused on like what's wrong with it. And so I think the the feedback that you get in an open source project tends to only be negative feedback. Like sometimes you get people telling you, thank you, like, thanks for building this thing. Um, it's great. I use it. It's great. But mostly you get the negative feedback. People engage when there's something they don't like, or something that doesn't work, something that's missing. And it is tough. It is really tough. In terms of building a thick skin, yeah, I think, um, I think I don't know if anybody on this call has ever listened to or read David Foster Wallace's "This Is Water" speech. It was like a commencement speech, from like 2005 or something, and it encourages you to like be more empathetic, or like more compassionate about like the subjective experience of other people. And so when you get this negative feedback, like, you have to realize that like it isn't always about you, or like a criticism of you. Like it may actually be that that person is just having like a tough time. They're having a bad day. Maybe they've got everybody's got stress, like everybody's got difficulties in their job or difficulties with their family. And so, whenever you're seeing this feedback, you don't have that context of like that person and like what they're dealing with in their life. And so I think you have to take the negative feedback with a grain of salt, and realize that when somebody's annoyed with your software not doing what they wish it did, or being perfect in the ways that they wish for it to be perfect, that comment is as much about them as it is about you. And so you have to you know try not to take it too personally. I do not read my Amazon book reviews, and so that was like, I just decided not to do that. And yeah, and I try not to Google myself, and I try not to look at, like, I rarely look at my Google results. I don't look up things on, Twitter. I guess it's X now. Um, but yeah, so social media is not a good place to get feedback. But every now and then there'll be comments on GitHub that hurt, and yeah, and over time, like it starts to hurt less, and then after a while you become numb to it. I think Hadley's like totally numb to any sort of feedback, and even to the point where yeah, he doesn't mind being too blunt with users. It's like, I'm sorry you don't like that, but I'm not going to fix it, basically.
I love that, Wes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wes. It's just reminding me of the episode of Ted Lasso I just watched last night too. I wish Deep Show was here for that. Um, let's see. Okay, Dan, I see you had asked a question a little bit earlier here about LLMs and generative AI. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rachel. Just curious, Wes, to hear your own kind of top of mind views on how Posit intends to position itself around generative AI and LLMs, maybe in particular. Thinking about all the different ways that LLMs obviously rely on data, even though they're not always transparent. But what are your thoughts around how Posit can meaningfully position itself as a tool for developing generative AI, for testing and or monitoring generative AI responses, and so on?
Yeah, will preface what I'm saying by saying that there, yeah, I think are aspects of this that are I'm not sure what the phrase is, above my pay grade, but I do know that Copilot is a big deal for developer productivity, and making Copilot available and easy to use in for people to opt in and use, and kind of using the LLM features in a way that helps people be more productive and use the tool in the way that it's best used, which is you can use Copilot to generate unit test cases for you and help with repetitive tasks that you might otherwise like have to do a bunch of typing and maybe make a lot more errors than Copilot would make the first time. Obviously, there's copyright concerns and sort of IP concerns and other concerns about misuse of LLMs, and I do, yeah, I am concerned about the ethical use of LLMs and kind of the potentially harmful effects on society. I think the downside of making developers more productive is that in the future we need fewer developers most likely, and so that does have like a negative effect on the workforce. But you would hope that at some point, as we all become more productive, that we can work less. I think that's always been like the sort of the dream of like increased productivity in the future. Means we all don't have to work as hard. But often, the pointy-haired bosses, would prefer that we do twice as much work in the same amount of time with better tools. But so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think integrating Copilot into Posit's product offerings is, I think that's table stakes in 2024. And so we can have LLM assisted data exploration, development, testing, and yeah, I think I'm interested in like other sorts of LLM assisted like workflows around data, like actual data analysis, like helping you like actually ask better questions about the data. I think that's one interesting area of research. So not just like, how do I make, show me how to make this plot with ggplot2, but actually like what are some other ways questions that I could ask, or like ways that I could look at this data that might bring more insights. I think that's a pretty interesting an interesting area, kind of like a LLM powered like research assistant kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I think you're talking about ways in which LLMs can help make, R or Python use more productive. I was almost thinking the opposite, like how Posit as a form of IDE or development workspace could help in the creation and augmentation of, say, open source LLM models. And maybe
Oh,
it's
I
not the
see.
right tool for that. Maybe other tools are really more well suited to that use case, which is fine too. but maybe in the future there's a place for Posit in that space.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I mean the primary language of doing LLM research and implementations is is Python, and I mean I think there's some C++ development and probably some Rust development here and there, but I think to the extent that I think we're building development environments that assist teams that are doing LLM development or collaborating on LLM development. I don't know that we have any specific plans, or at least specific plans that we're able to talk about around like tooling to support LLM model development specifically. But I do think it's an interesting and an important area. And given that the Python world in particular has played like a pretty essential role in like being the kind of the canvas for where a lot of these tools are being developed. I think as a company, we should try to we should we should look seriously at like how we can you know yeah how we can help, or at least like what we can reasonably do to like help with the LLM model development and the collaboration process around it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to make sure I don't forget to go over to some of the anonymous questions on Slido, and one that was asked over there was, in your opinion, what's the best way to start in Python?
Yeah. I if you've never worked in Python before, I guess my advice is always, to find something concrete that you would like to do with Python. It could be something like really mundane, like, uh, you know, if you're curious about, I don't know, like what you're spending your money on at Amazon or something like that. I get really curious about my personal finances. So, but find some problem that's relevant to your life. And I think there's a number of great books that help with, learning Python from a beginner standpoint, like automate the boring stuff with Python. I know the author of that book, and you know, there's um, there's some other kind of introductory Python books just for the Python language. I have a book that's now in its third edition called Python for Data Analysis that has, if you're interested in learning about data analysis and data science, it has like kind of a quick start in Python. It doesn't go into object-oriented development or building, serious software in Python. But if you're looking to learn just enough Python to use pandas and get up and running with, Jupyter notebooks and work with data, I think it's a great resource for that. And so I wrote the book intending for it to be like a quick start for somebody who has some basic programming experience, but wants to use Python for kind of data analysis, data science.
Thank you. Let's see. Russell, I see you just asked a question in the chat about advice for building a company. Want to jump in?
Sure. Great presentation. Thank you. As someone who has built several really successful companies, Wes, do you have any recommendations for people who would like to build companies, particularly data science companies?
Yeah, it's very difficult. My route to building companies has been definitely different from from a lot of people, because I've really focused on the technology, and then kind of retrofitting like a business model and a corporate structure like around, like in support of the open source projects. And so for me, the process has been build an open source software project, um, build critical mass, start engaging with users of that project, and then learn from those users, like, well, outside of the open source project and solving the kind of low level technology problems, like what are the next set of problems that need to be solved, around that. So it could be just like in the case of Voltron Data, for example, like the first product that we launched was like an enterprise support and open source partnership program for Apache Arrow, because we recognized that there were businesses that were incorporating Arrow into their own products and systems, and they needed to have a reliable partner and a private channel to discuss issues that they encountered using the open source software in their internal development, and to create a structure where we could align on development initiatives within the open source project that they wanted to put funding behind, but in like a more structured way, where there's a contract and like kind of deliverables and timelines and like concrete resourcing, and all of the kind of things that you would need around like a commercial kind of enterprise contract. I think that other people start companies that are more, they start with identifying a business problem and conceptualizing a product that solves that problem. And so kind of starting from more like the product on down, and you say, okay, given what the product needs to do, and so like the technology that you build to deliver that product ends up being like something incidental that, in a sense, like it's like the iceberg thing. Like there's this bit of ice that you see above the water, like that's the product, but then there's all this other stuff that you build underneath. And so from the user standpoint, they don't need to know that much about, how it's built, just that it works. I haven't built too many of like those kinds of companies, but I've seen many people, work on them. So I think learning from your users, being open-minded, have strong opinions, but loosely held opinions. So be willing to change your mind and learn from feedback. And I think, I've benefited greatly from mentorship and help from many others, from the generation above me. I'm 38. I've been doing entrepreneurial things for, the past 11 or 12 years. In my 20s, I benefited greatly from folks who, had, 10 or 20 years of experience on me in entrepreneurship and in open source software. And so, I learned a lot from people in the Python community, around open source community building, project development, culture. And, I think without that mentorship and that help from others who'd been on the path, before me, I would have, it would have been harder for me to get where I am now. So standing on the shoulders of giants, certainly.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess while we're on this topic of advice for people starting a company, Wes, what is one of the most memorable pieces of career advice you've either received or maybe given throughout your professional journey?
I would say for me, yeah, probably the most frequent advice that I give to other people is to focus on like people and relationships. So in investing in your relationships with people that you want to work with for a long time, and also viewing your working relationships with a long-term mindset, not just like, what value do we have to each other right now in the project that we were working on together, but also like what value might these working relationships have in the future. And so for me, both in a entrepreneurial setting, but also in an open source software setting, I've taken that mindset in how I interact with other open source developers from this kind of long-term relationship building standpoint. So it might be that there's no opportunity to collaborate with somebody or to work with somebody right now, but there might be in 5 years. And so it's kind of this balancing act of like, how do you spend your time, or like, who do you decide who to collaborate with, and like where to spend, your 8 or 10 hours of working hours in a day. And but I think finding people that you like working with people that you feel inspired and productive around, like who helps generate ideas and helps you feel kind of motivated and productive about what you're working on, and and finding and cultivating those relationships and people that you want to work with for a long time. And so, I have people that I've worked with, actively off and on for over a decade, and I treasure those relationships. And so I think I've definitely seen other people who, are working in a more, transactional mindset and thinking more short term about, their relationships, or treating, kind of people as more kind of interchangeable parts, who, serve kind of a short-term purpose to achieve like some, business goal or some, complete some task that you have in front of you. But kind of taking a more people and human centric like mindset towards that, I think for me at least um, has been a lot more rewarding, and I think has been, more valuable long term. And so I always encourage other people to to the extent that they're able to take that approach as well.
Absolutely. That's great. Thank you. I know this is always one of the quickest hours for us of the week. So I will be sure to go through and check out any questions that we have missed and try and collect those. But I did just want to add or ask one more question. We are going to be in Minneapolis as a company for a company-wide work week. And so some people had submitted questions ahead of time for a panel that we're having there. And so and you don't have to cram maybe all of this into the 2 minutes here. So maybe let me make it more generic. What are you most excited about at Posit in the year ahead? And perhaps about your vision for Python work at Posit going forward.
Well, that's a big question. I personally like I think this is for me, this has been like one of the first opportunities I've had to in the last several years to get my head above water and take a more like a more like a kind of my data science walkabout, so to speak, and learn more about what everybody else has been building and doing in the last 5 or 6 years, where I've been like I've had really had my head down and been really focused on the Arrow project and its ecosystem. And so I'm really impressed with everything that I see that's been built in the last few years around developer tools and productivity and environments and tooling that supports all these different types of work. And so I think I'm also looking, sort of thinking longer term about like what are my next big projects going to look like, and like what else could I work on aside from continuing to nudge along the projects that I've worked on in the past, to help reach kind of the next plateau of like progress and growth in the ecosystem. So I'm in a learning mode. I think that I think that the people that I'm working with at Posit, it's a very stimulating environment and a place for me to learn and come up with new ideas. And so I'm really excited to see what that what that holds for me personally, and also for the company and for the data science ecosystem more generally.
Thank you so much, Wes. I really tried to cram a few questions into that last one, and you did a great job there. I really appreciate you joining us to share your experience. This has been great. Thanks
Thanks everybody for hanging out with me for an hour. I enjoyed it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much for joining us today. I know there were a few people joining for their first time ever today for the Hangout. So I did just want to let people know, again, we do have these every Thursday at 12 Eastern time. If you use the short link I just shared in the chat, you can add them to your calendar. Come whenever it fits your schedule. I'm so excited to go back and read through this chat and all the resources and everything that people shared. If you did want to save the chat for yourself, the three dots below it in Zoom, you can just open that up to save the chat there too. Thank you all so much for the great questions and everything. I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day.